there's a truth few dare to face. Narcissists don't live as themselves. They live through the mask they put on for the world to see. That mask is built from charm, sweet promises, and an appearance that seems flawless. But behind it all lies a massive emptiness, a bone-deep fear of being exposed. And eventually the moment comes when someone strong enough sees through the disguise and the mask begins to crack. That moment marks the start of a silent war. For the narcissist, being truly seen feels like a kind of psychological death. They survive by illusion, and when that illusion begins to crumble, they can't bear it. Most people assume that once unmasked, they'll simply leave. But the reality is the opposite. They cling to you even harder, with a cold fury hiding behind their smile. This isn't just ordinary discomfort, it's an ego crisis. Imagine a castle made of sand suddenly struck by a powerful wave. To keep it from collapsing, they'll throw themselves into action, using every psychological tactic they can, because if the mask falls completely, they have nothing left. Only the emptiness and shame they've spent their entire lives avoiding. What makes this situation dangerous is the way they react. When you become too dangerous to manipulate, in their eyes, you're no longer just a person, you're a mortal threat. You are the mirror reflecting the truth they've been running from their whole life, and no one hates the mirror more than the one terrified of seeing their real face. So from the very moment you stand firm against their mind games, you've stepped into the storm. This isn't the simple ending of a toxic relationship. It's the opening act of a cycle of manipulation that's sharper, colder, and more ruthless. A battle where truth and illusion collide. And it's in that crisis that you'll finally see what few ever recognize. Real strength isn't in the shouting, the rage, or the performances they stage. Strength lies in calm silence, in the ability to see through the mask without letting it shake you. But to hold that ground, you must know what's coming, because this is only the beginning. Part 2. The probing game. When the narcissist tests your weaknesses. When a narcissist realizes that their first pricks of the needle weren't sharp enough to pierce your defenses, they don't stop there. Instead, they escalate, turning their probing game more sophisticated and more intense. Offhand comments, hesitant gestures, or carefully staged situations begin to surface, each one designed to study you like a psychological experiment. If a frown makes you lose patience, they take note. If a fake compliment makes you smile, they remember. If prolonged silence makes you uneasy, they file it away as the key to unlocking your mind. Every emotional slip you show becomes data, and in that quiet accumulation, they prepare for the next strike. From these small tricks, they gradually slide into deeper emotional experiments. A tragic story is suddenly told, not to share, but to measure your compassion. If you instantly reach out to help, they know your empathy remains an easy door to open. But if you listen calmly without dissolving into the pain they staged, you become harder to grasp. Your composure is a silent warning that you won't fall easily into their trap, and to them, that signals you are edging dangerously close to becoming a threat. It doesn't stop with stirring up pity. They also test the boundaries of your self-respect with small but deliberate actions. A broken promise, showing up late, an unreasonable demand. None of these are random. They are all measurements to see if you'll dare to say no. If you go along, they know there's still room to exploit. If you politely but firmly decline, you've laid another brick in a solid wall, making them restless and desperate to break through. Within that quiet tension, their unease begins to reveal itself, and you'll feel the shifts, sometimes tender, sometimes cutting with sarcasm, sometimes pulling you close, sometimes pushing you away. The danger of this probing phase is that you might believe you're safe when, in reality, they're recording every psychological detail. Every time you lose your temper, you hand them an arrow. Every time you soften, you hand them a knife. Every time you stumble in confusion, you hand them a map to your vulnerabilities. Piece by piece, These fragments form an arsenal they can unleash in the next stage. That's why so many people who thought they had broken free suddenly find themselves dragged back, because they never realized that each tiny reaction was being stored as fuel for future attacks. The only way not to be pulled into the probing game is to keep your mind steady and your reactions unpredictable. A cutting remark receives nothing but a calm smile. A sorrowful tale is heard but not met with promises of rescue. An unreasonable request is answered with a gentle but unshakable refusal. These responses are like a stone unmoved by crashing waves, making every attempt to find a weakness meaningless. When they can't locate an entry point into your mind, their probing loses its power. Most important of all, you must realize that these needle pricks are not a reflection of your worth or your weakness, but of their fear. They are terrified you've seen the truth they've hidden, terrified you'll tear away the mask they've spent their entire life constructing. That's why they persist in testing every crack, because their fear of exposure is so overwhelming, it drives them into desperation. By standing firm and refusing to be swayed by their experiments, you send a message that can't be mistaken. You are not a stage for their performance of power. Your calmness not only protects you, it forces them into a heightened state of alarm because they realize their familiar game no longer works, and that is when they are compelled to shift into the next stage, where the tricks are no longer tiny needles but a violent storm, a stage of tactical escalation where truth and illusion collide in psychological battles fiercer than ever before. Part 3. Tactical Escalation. When the probing game no longer delivers the results they want, the narcissist shifts into the next phase, tactical escalation. If before they only used tiny needles to test your reactions, now they bring out sharper, heavier blows with one purpose: to shake you, to make you doubt yourself, and to strip away your steadiness. It unfolds like a crashing wave, no longer quiet experiments, but an aggressive surge from someone losing control. The first signs of escalation are easy to spot. Words grow sharper, arguments flare up repeatedly, and your emotions are pushed into a constant state of tension. They may begin using gaslighting in a far more blatant way, denying what they said, twisting facts, leaving you trapped between your own memory and the story they've constructed. The more you try to prove you're right, the tighter they twist the narrative, turning every piece of evidence you offer into something against you. At this stage, it's no longer testing, it's a direct psychological assault. Alongside gaslighting, they increase accusations and labels. Familiar phrases suddenly dominate. You're selfish, you're controlling, you don't love enough, you're the problem. These labels are repeated not just to tear you down, but to plant seeds of doubt in your mind. And if you hear them long enough, even the strongest person might quietly wonder, am I really like that? In that moment of hesitation, the narcissist knows they've cracked open a door. What makes this stage more dangerous than the rest is the involvement of others. When you prove too resilient to control directly, they bring outsiders into the game. A whispered complaint to your friends, a half-true, half-fabricated story told to your family, and gradually they construct a picture where they are the victim and you are the villain. Isolation begins to form. And that's the strategy. Without allies, you're easier to break down. In the middle of this escalation, they'd also use sudden sweetness as if it were a drug. After cruel criticism comes an unexpected hug, a tender apology, a small act of care. The alternation between pain and sweetness traps your mind in a vicious cycle, hurt yet hopeful, ready to leave yet pulled back again. This is the core of the narcissistic loop. They make you believe that if you just try a little harder, things will return to how they once were. But the truth is, the deeper you go into escalation, the fiercer the storm becomes. Every attempt to reason, prove, or argue only drains you further. Because their goal was never truth, it has always been control. The stronger your reactions, the more they know the invisible strings still bind you, and that ensures you remain prey in a lopsided psychological battle. It's only when you recognize the true nature of this phase, that it's not ordinary conflict but a calculated strategy to weaken you, that you can hold your balance. The only power that neutralizes their escalation is steady calm, the ability to remain centered and not let their blows pierce your core. When you hold on to that clarity, you've already stepped one foot outside the storm, even as the winds still howl around you. Part 3. Tactical Escalation. When the probing game no longer delivers the results they want, the narcissist shifts into the next phase, tactical escalation. If before they only used tiny needles to test your reactions, now they bring out sharper, heavier blows with one purpose: to shake you, to make you doubt yourself, and to strip away your steadiness. It unfolds like a crashing wave, no longer quiet experiments, but an aggressive surge from someone losing control. The first signs of escalation are easy to spot. Words grow sharper, arguments flare up repeatedly, and your emotions are pushed into a constant state of tension. They may begin using gaslighting in a far more blatant way, denying what they said, twisting facts, leaving you trapped between your own memory and the story they've constructed. The more you try to prove you're right, the tighter they twist the narrative, turning every piece of evidence you offer into something against you. At this stage, it's no longer testing, it's a direct psychological assault. Alongside gaslighting, they increase accusations and labels. Familiar phrases suddenly dominate. You're selfish, you're controlling, you don't love enough, you're the problem. These labels are repeated not just to tear you down, but to plant seeds of doubt in your mind. And if you hear them long enough, even the strongest person might quietly wonder, am I really like that? In that moment of hesitation, the narcissist knows they've cracked open a door. What makes this stage more dangerous than the rest is the involvement of others. When you prove too resilient to control directly, they bring outsiders into the game. A whispered complaint to your friends, a half-true, half-fabricated story told to your family, and gradually they construct a picture where they are the victim and you are the villain. Isolation begins to form. And that's the strategy. Without allies, you're easier to break down. In the middle of this escalation, they'd also use sudden sweetness as if it were a drug. After cruel criticism comes an unexpected hug, a tender apology, a small act of care. The alternation between pain and sweetness traps your mind in a vicious cycle, hurt yet hopeful, ready to leave yet pulled back again. This is the core of the narcissistic loop. They make you believe that if you just try a little harder, things will return to how they once were. But the truth is, the deeper you go into escalation, the fiercer the storm becomes. Every attempt to reason, prove, or argue only drains you further. Because their goal was never truth, it has always been control. The stronger your reactions, the more they know the invisible strings still bind you, and that ensures you remain prey in a lopsided psychological battle. It's only when you recognize the true nature of this phase, that it's not ordinary conflict but a calculated strategy to weaken you, that you can hold your balance. The only power that neutralizes their escalation is steady calm, the ability to remain centered and not let their blows pierce your core. When you hold on to that clarity, you've already stepped one foot outside the storm, even as the winds still howl around you. Part 4. When you become immune to manipulation. When their escalation tactics no longer work, when gaslighting fails to shake you, when accusations don't push you into hurried apologies, and even their alternating sweetness can't lure you back, the narcissist comes face to face with their greatest fear: powerlessness. In their eyes, you are no longer the familiar supply, no longer someone easily controlled, but instead a real threat, because in the narcissist's world, losing control isn't just a failure, it's the collapse of their entire identity. At this stage, you become a mirror reflecting the truth they've always denied. Every time you hold your boundaries, you not only protect yourself, but also force them to confront the image they cannot bear: emptiness, fragility, and the terror of abandonment. That's why, instead of accepting it, they lash out more intensely. They feel threatened not by what you do, but by the simple fact that you refuse to play their game. A calm silence, a steady gaze, or even a short, firm reply like, "I don't agree," cuts into the deepest part of their hidden wounds. The more immune you are to manipulation, the more unsettled they become. In the narcissist's subconscious, every relationship is built on power and control. When that element disappears, they feel as if they're drifting into a void with nothing solid to cling to. It's in this moment that they enter an ego crisis, a quiet panic where rage, fear, and despair fuse into a volatile energy. What makes this crisis so dangerous is that it doesn't always explode in obvious outbursts. Instead, it shows up in uneasy eyes, in the irregular rhythm of their words, in sudden shifts between icy detachment and weak pleading. They want to cling to you, yet despise you for seeing the truth. They want to keep you close, yet destroy you to erase the living proof of their failure. This paradox creates an atmosphere so suffocating it feels as if an unspoken battle could erupt at any second. And yet, it is in this very stage that you begin to see something vital. Your immunity is not only a defensive wall, it's proof of your psychological growth, because to resist manipulation, you've learned to separate your emotions from their power games. You've learned to observe instead of react, to stand outside the storm instead of being dragged into its spiral. That is the turning point. For the first time, control no longer belongs to them, it belongs to you. When this happens, the narcissist usually chooses one of two paths. They may retreat in bitterness, leaving behind a trail of accusations and complaints. Or they may prepare a final blow, a far more dangerous tactic, inverting reality itself, recasting you as the villain in the story of your own life. Whichever path they take, the truth remains unchanged. Your immunity has shattered the very foundation of their psychology. You haven't just broken free from their control. You've become living proof of the powerlessness they fear most. Part 5. The Final Blow. Reality Inversion. When your immunity becomes undeniable, the narcissist enters their most dangerous stage, the final blow, reality inversion. This is no longer about probing or emotional escalation, it is a desperate attempt to rewrite the entire story. In this moment, you are no longer a witness to truth, you are cast as the villain in the script they stage. And here you see their most insidious cruelty. The swapping of roles, so thorough that both you and those around you may begin to doubt what's real. The inversion begins with words that seem harmless, often disguised as soft complaints. They say they are hurt by your coldness, that you've abandoned them, that your distance is wounding them. At first, these sound like nothing more than sighs, but in reality they are the first bricks in a wall of distortion. When you react, they record it. When you stay silent, they twist that silence into further proof of their victimhood. Step by step, they push you into the role of the aggressor, while they slip into the costume of the betrayed. If private complaints aren't enough, they expand the stage to the outside world. Half-truths wrapped in a cloak of worry are shared with friends, co-workers, or family. They say things like, "I don't understand why they've changed," or "they've become selfish," or "they're growing so cold and cruel." These aren't blatant lies, they're mixtures of truth and fabrication, carefully blended to sound convincing. This is their most dangerous tactic, planting doubt by mixing reality with fiction so skillfully that people struggle to separate the two. Meanwhile, you begin to feel the weight of pressure from both sides. Outwardly, questioning looks and loaded comments appear more often. Inwardly, you start to wonder if you really are too harsh, too distant, too unforgiving. This is the moment they crave most, when you no longer fully trust yourself, when even your own mind gets pulled into the spiral of doubt. Reality inversion isn't about proving you wrong, it's about making you lose faith in your own rightness. What makes this tactic terrifying is that it doesn't just attack you, it warps how others see you. When they succeed in planting seeds of suspicion, your connections begin to shift. Friends who once stood by you now look at you differently. Even loved ones hesitate when you try to explain yourself. That isolation is the heaviest blow, because human beings need connection to survive. When your network of trust is distorted, you find yourself not only facing the narcissist, but also facing a world that suddenly seems unsure of you. And yet, even in this darkness, a new door begins to open, because when you realize they've resorted to their final move, bending truth and claiming victimhood, you understand that every other path has already failed. You endured the probing, you withstood the escalation, you stood firm through their ego crisis. Reality inversion isn't proof of their strength, it's proof of their ultimate weakness. It is their last desperate attempt to keep you in the game, and at the same time, the clearest confirmation that you've stepped outside their control. What matters most now is not rushing to convince the world, but holding on to truth within yourself. When you stop being shaken by their distortions, you become your own anchor. From that anchor, you can slowly rebuild trust, reconnect with those who truly see you, and allow the light of truth to dissolve the darkness of their lies. Part 6. The Erosion of Reality. When the blow of reality inversion is launched, the cracks in the relationship no longer remain on the surface. They begin to eat into the very foundation of your mind. This is when the erosion of reality takes place, a silent yet devastating process where you slowly lose your sense of certainty about yourself, your memory, and even the world around you. It's no longer just about accusations or complaints, but a systematic strategy designed to make you question every fragment of reality you once trusted. When they deny what you saw with your own eyes, when they insist that words they never spoke are the truth, you slip into confusion. At first, you react with anger, trying to prove you're right, bringing evidence, recalling details, defending your memory. But the harder you fight, the deeper you sink into a maze with no exit. They keep twisting the story tighter and tighter until every piece of proof you present is made meaningless. Little by little, you stop knowing whether to trust your own memory or the version of events they repeat with cold certainty. It is that repetition that becomes their most dangerous weapon. When you hear often enough that you're wrong, that you misunderstood, that you're too sensitive, your mind begins to doubt itself. You ask yourself, did I really remember it wrong? Am I too harsh? Am I exaggerating? And the moment those questions take root, the foundation of your reality begins to wobble. This is where erosion cuts deepest, not because they've convinced you entirely, but because they've made you afraid to trust yourself. The erosion doesn't come only from their words, but from the atmosphere they create around you. When they spread their inverted story to others, suspicious looks and loaded questions appear. Every stare, every pause in conversation feels like another blade cutting into your already shaky trust. You feel alone, and in that isolation, outside voices weigh heavier. When one person whispers, maybe you overreacted, and another nods in agreement, your confusion grows. Is the truth still yours to hold? The cruelty of this attack lies in its target. It isn't aimed at disproving a single event. It is aimed at dismantling your very ability to separate truth from lies. Once you doubt your memory, your perceptions, your very self, you're standing on quicksand. Every struggle to prove yourself only drags you down further, and in that disorientation, the narcissist seizes the upper hand, not by offering truth, but by convincing you that you cannot trust your own mind. And yet, in the middle of this storm, a small light can appear, because if you recognize that your doubt doesn't come from a weak memory, but from a deliberate strategy to destroy your trust, you begin to see the game for what it is. When you start writing down the truth, keeping notes, holding on to small pieces of evidence, you create an anchor for your mind. From that anchor, you can slowly rebuild the foundation that was eroded. The most important thing is to resist falling into the trap of believing you're crazy, that you're weak. In reality, the confusion you feel is proof that you are standing inside a psychological war designed to break even the strongest. And if you can still recognize your confusion, It means you still have enough clarity to hold on to the light. Reality erosion only has power if you surrender yourself. But once you begin to see it as a tactic, you've already laid the first stone to rebuild your world. Part 7. Emotional Terrorism. When your sense of reality begins to waver, the narcissist doesn't stop there, because their goal isn't just to make you doubt your memory or perception, but to strike directly at the center of your emotions. This is the stage where your deepest wounds are exploited, where every pain, every old memory, every vulnerability is turned into a weapon. To outsiders, it may look like nothing more than heated arguments, but in truth, this is a calculated form of emotional terrorism, a war where the weapons are words, stares, and cold silences, each carrying a destructive force more damaging than physical blows. Emotional terrorism never happens by chance. It is built on the intimate knowledge the narcissist has gathered about you over time. They know your fears. They know which memories still haunt you. They know which relationships in your past left scars. And when the moment comes, they summon these things not to comfort, but to cut deeper, to reopen wounds, until you are so raw that you feel trapped between two choices: desperate resistance or surrender for the sake of temporary peace. At some point, you notice they are no longer attacking your actions, they are attacking your very essence. If you are independent, they call you selfish. If you set boundaries, they brand you cold. If you have confidence, they degrade you as arrogant. Every strength you possess is twisted into a flaw in their narrative. And through constant repetition, you begin to question even the qualities that once made you proud. This is the essence of psychological takedown, turning your inner light into darkness within your own eyes. To intensify the effect, they weave emotional terror with deliberate silence. A dismissive glance, a long calculated pause, or a sudden withdrawal lands like a sentence. You suffer not only from the direct attacks, but from the cold indifference that follows. Abandonment staged as punishment. This pairing of pain and emptiness exhausts you faster than any open conflict ever could. The most dangerous part of this process is how easily it drives you into self-blame. Under emotional terrorism, many begin to believe they themselves are the reason for the abuse. You may ask yourself, am I really that difficult? Was I wrong? And once that seed takes root, the narcissist has succeeded, because you no longer see them as the culprit, but start seeing yourself as the cause. This is control at its peak. You are not chained by force, but imprisoned by the belief that you deserve your suffering. And yet, hidden within this pain is the spark of your awakening. When you realize that their strikes are not born from truth about who you are, but from deliberate distortion, you begin to see the difference between your essence and their projection. That realization is the first crack in the circle of terror, the first step towards separating yourself from manipulated emotion. Once you recognize that all of it is a calculated strategy to break you, you can begin to step outside the storm. That shift is decisive, from victim to witness. In that position, every word, every look, every cold silence loses its ability to define you. They may still sting, but they no longer shape your identity. And in that moment, the storm of emotional terrorism starts to lose its original power, opening the path toward the next stage, recognizing and escaping the toxic bond they've tried so hard to tie around you. Part 8. The Emotional Addiction Trap. Trauma Bonding. When emotional terrorism still isn't enough to break your will, the narcissist unleashes their most dangerous weapon, the emotional addiction trap, known as trauma bonding. This isn't a new tactic, but rather a refined combination of pain and fleeting mercy woven together into a cycle that binds you to them. It's a spiral where you are both wounded and tethered, like a moth unable to escape the very flame that is burning it alive. The danger lies in the way they blend two opposite states. After a storm of cruel words or suffocating silence, they suddenly soften, offering a hug, an apology, or a burst of unexpected affection. In that instant, your brain experiences a chemical shock. The pain is temporarily soothed, and the relief feels so intense it becomes almost addictive. Like an addict craving the antidote to their suffering, you begin to endure the torment just for the chance to taste the rare moments of tenderness that follow. The longer you remain in this cycle, the more you feel trapped in a twisted game of punishment and reward. A criticism cuts you down, but a gentle touch that follows makes you feel saved. Your heart begins to beat in rhythm with their manipulations, pushed into the depths one moment, lifted to the heights the next. And it is this constant oscillation that becomes the real weapon. You grow dependent on the one who hurts you because they are also the only one who offers relief. In truth, this trap is a well-known psychological mechanism. When the brain is repeatedly thrown into tension and then given release, it forms a warped attachment to the very source of both. You fear them, yet long for them. You want to run, yet cannot leave. This is why so many victims, though fully aware they are being manipulated and harmed, remain unable to break free. They are not held by chains, but by the emotional rope braided from pain and intermittent sweetness. To strengthen this trap, the narcissist plants another toxic seed, the belief that everything is your fault. They convince you that if only you change, if only you are better, everything will stabilize and you will finally receive their full love. And in your thirst for that complete love, you endure, you sacrifice, you remain bound. This is how trauma bonding transforms a victim into their own jailer. No locks, no shackles, just the prison of hope and self-blame. Yet within this spiral lies the possibility of awakening. The moment you begin to see the pattern, that every wave of pain is always followed by a calculated gesture of tenderness, you start to break the illusion. Real love is never built on suffering exchanged for scraps of affection, and a bond rooted in fear will never last. Once you realize this, you have already taken your first step outside the trap, even if it's only a small one. Trauma bonding is the final stone anchoring you inside their control. But once you see it, once you name it, once you understand that love is never synonymous with cruelty, you begin to reclaim the key. From that moment forward, the rope that bound you with both pain and hope slowly starts to lose its power. Part 9. The Way Out. Observing instead of being pulled in. After enduring every spiral of chaos, from probing and escalation to reality inversion, emotional terrorism, and the painful trap of trauma bonding, you finally discover an essential truth. The way out isn't found in arguing to prove you're right, nor in trying to persuade the narcissist to change. The escape lies in learning to observe instead of being pulled in. This is the key that opens the final door, the ending that allows you to leave the labyrinth of darkness. When you step back and begin to watch the entire game from the position of an observer, you see clearly the tricks that once left you disoriented. The accusations that once cut deep now appear as hollow echoes. The sudden hugs after storms of rage reveal themselves as staged tactics. Even the cold silences lose their power because you understand they are nothing more than tools of control. Each time you refuse to react as they expect, you are slipping free from the invisible ropes they once tied around you. Observation is not numbness, it is awareness. You still feel the sting of pain, you still recognize the anger, but instead of drowning in it, you watch it drift past. You no longer allow emotions to dictate your responses, you let understanding guide you. And in that separation, the narcissist loses their greatest weapon, control over your mind. Once that control is taken back, their arsenal collapses. Gaslighting can no longer make you doubt yourself because you already know the truth. Accusations no longer throw you into chaos because you recognize them as projections of their own fear. Emotional storms no longer chain you because you see that love was never meant to be built on suffering. In this newfound calm, you begin to see yourself more clearly than ever before. The experience of despace is not only the peace you reclaim, but the growth you gain through the breaking. You understand your boundaries, you know how to guard the truth in your mind, and you've discovered the strength of quiet clarity. What was once used to hurt you now becomes wisdom, armor to recognize manipulation in any form in the future. And that is true rebirth, not a person defined by the past, but one who is free to live in the fullness of their authentic self. At the end of this journey, one truth shines above all. The greatest victory is not in defeating the narcissist, but in reclaiming yourself. Every tactic, from probing to inversion, from emotional terrorism to trauma bonding, only held power while you remained inside the game. But when you step out, when you choose to observe instead of follow, when you hold onto the light within your soul, their entire power dissolves, like shadows vanishing before the dawn. And that is the final message. You did not merely survive the psychological storm. You were reborn. You have become stronger, wiser, freer. Because real strength was never in their hands. It has always been within you, waiting for the moment to awaken.